Welcome to Drummer Daily. Here's my dad, Daniel Hadaway.
Hey there, welcome back to Drummer Daily. I hope you're ready for another awesome week of drumming talk and such. And so I'm super pumped that you're here. I'm pumped that I'm here. I'm pumped that you're here. Hope you're pumped that I'm here, and you're pumped that you're here, and everyone's pumped that everyone's here. So before we get started today, I want to address something that just happened to come up this weekend. And it's I noticed it in a few different places, and so I just wanted to just make a note in case you're wondering. I got someone commented on a YouTube video. And by the way, my YouTube channel that I have is where I try to post. Occasionally, I post kind of themed instructional videos. So it's not just like here's a sweet lick to add to your drumming chops or whatever. It's more of here's a concept and a few different tips for going after this certain concepts. Like here's how to play more quietly without losing your feel, or here's some unique ways to add dynamics to add dynamics or build up into a new section of a song without having to play louder, or just different things like that. So they're kind of more conceptual, a little longer form, and they involve playing the drums a little bit. And I got a comment on there that was like, yeah, something like blah, 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 don't talk, less talk, more playing. And then I also got a comment, or I saw a review on this podcast, actually. Someone said, it's heavy on like it's light on content but heavy on consistency, or something like that. Like you're not I need more content, and I don't put enough content in the podcast or whatever. I talk too much or whatever. And so I just want to tell you a few things, and this is something I've noticed about drummers as a kind of a culture, the culture of drummers and what we expect normally. I feel like as a whole, as a community, us drummers, we have become so desensitized / used to quote unquote instructional drumming experiences, whether they're drum clinics or drum lesson websites or even YouTube videos that are trying to teach you something. We've become so accustomed to those different resources really not teaching anything, and just being a means for watching some other drummer play the drums. Just watching someone perform. That we're not learning anything. But even like at the most, like it's so funny because like I go out of my way to teach. And I make it clear like I'm teaching something, and I talk on this podcast and don't play for really two reasons. One is that it's not practical to do a daily podcast with drumming in it. But number two is most of the time, even if I were to talk about very specific drumming concepts and mouth them out or whatever, I know that most people listening to this podcast listen to this podcast in their car, or listen to this podcast while they're doing something else around the house. I'd say 95% at least of the people listening to this podcast are not sitting behind a drum kit, ready to play out whatever I'm playing. I don't listen to podcasts, I don't listen to any podcasts except for when I'm doing something else, and so for me to try to give you concepts or specific exercises or playing on this podcast isn't really practical. My job with this podcast is to inspire you and to give you ideas for things to explore on the drums, not to give you specific techniques to try. I do, like I said, the YouTube videos show a little bit of that, and my Facebook Live videos that I do every week are definitely more playing related. But the podcast here is more to keep you motivated and keep you going on your journey towards being a great musician. But yeah, I thought it was funny that someone mentioned on the YouTube video, where all of my YouTube videos are meant to teach something, the person complained that I wasn't performing and I don't blame the person for that. I actually just think that we as a drummer culture have just gotten so accustomed to wanting to be entertained and wanting to see somebody play something really cool and crazy, as opposed to as opposed to actually learning something, thinking about something, listening to a teacher teach about, something on the drums. But that's not what we're here for today. So what we are here for today is I wanted to just, and this is a good one because there's not a lot to go with this, but I just want to mention something to you and see how it sits with you. Today I want to talk about snare drum sound. And specifically just in general, I'm talking about, I guess mostly tuning. And because I know that some of you guys don't, some of us don't play in a situation where we're mic'd up all the time. And so this isn't about mixing or EQ or anything like that. This is about just the drum itself. And I've noticed this. I've done a few of these drumming intensives, or quite a few of these actually, in person with some drummers here in Nashville. And part of what we work on is tuning, specifically snare drum tuning. And I haven't done this with everybody, but I've done this a few times. And I've just said, if we work on tuning, I'll say, hey, can you take this drum and just start tuning it? And I've done this with a few drum lessons as well. And this is what normally happens when someone sits down to tune the drums that I've watched. Sit down, they might say, all right, they might immediately start tapping around, the different lugs, trying to figure out what's wrong and tuning it up or tuning it down, getting it right. They put their finger in the middle of the drum. They do all these different things trying to get it right. They do that for a few minutes at least and get it as close as they can, maybe. Some people will start from scratch. They'll detune the drum, completely start it from scratch, which a lot of times is a good way to kind of start back from square one. But what I'll see is kind of a recurring theme either way is that drummers will, spend 5 minutes trying to get the drum tuned back up the way they want it to be tuned, and then kind of throw up their hands and just say, all right, whatever, or this is as good as it's going to get, and I'm done. And I just want to contrast that with, I don't know where I learned this, but I don't think I necessarily learned the method is a little different, but really it's more of an approach to tuning snares and tuning drums in general. And that is, I remember very distinctly when I was in high school, we had a bunch of drummers in our drum line. We were in band class, and we had a separate little room that we worked on things in, apart from the band, so that we didn't disturb each other. And we were back there, and this was during orchestra season. So there we got a new snare drum head for the one of the orchestral snares that we had. And the drum teacher, she was like, hey, who wants to volunteer to switch out, put the head on this new drum? And I volunteered and said, hey, I'll do it. And so I went about putting this new head on this drum, and it took me the entire class period, which we had hour and a half long classes. So it took me probably a little less than an hour and a half to put this new top head on. And my friends were making fun of me, giving me such a hard time about how long it took me to tune this snare and get this snare head on. But I kid you not, everyone lost their minds with how great it sounded from the very beginning, and how great it sounded and how long the head lasted, how well it stayed in tune, how easy it was to tune after that point. Just basically how great the snare sounded. And it was a great snare too, that's part of it. But it's just funny to me that everyone else who had tuned these, she went through, she'd always ask people to tune drums, and this was the first time I'd done it. Everyone else was taking 10 minutes to put a head on, and it sounded like crap. And I put it on, an hour. Everyone's making fun of me, but then it sounds great. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe the fact that I did something different than everybody else has something to do with the fact that when I tuned the snare drum, it sounded different than everyone else's. And so all of this is leading up to me just saying to you that if the number one most likely reason why your snare drum sounds like garbage, if it does, is probably because you aren't caring enough to spend real time tuning that drum. It blows my mind how small amount of time most drummers spend tuning their drums, especially the snare drum, the one that you hit 1,000 times per song. And you spend 5 minutes, once every 3 months trying to tune it. It's like, where's the respect for your own sound and your own instrument? And so I just want to encourage you, however long you're taking, if you think you take long enough, double that amount of time and really spend time dialing in your snare drum sound, top and bottom head. But just in my own experience, that is the number one reason why your snare drum sound is garbage. Like I said, if you're unhappy with your snare drum sound, chances are you didn't spend enough time tuning it. And if you spend more time tuning it, you'll probably get somewhere good. Now, the head could be blown out. It could have not been seated properly. It can make it harder to tune. But I have played a lot of crappy snare drums in my lifetime, doing a lot of backline stuff, showing up, flying in somewhere and they have a snare drum there for you. And you got to make do with what you have. I've played a lot of really bad snare drums in my life, and I've never been in a situation where I wasn't able to get it to something reasonably acceptable, with a little bit of time and effort if I had it. So I believe that your drum is not the reason why your drum sounds bad. It's something else. So the first place to go is probably how long you're spending tuning your snare drum. All right, I hope that's inspiring for you today. Like I said, I'm sharing information that you can then go take and work on your drums. I can't give you a bunch of chops to work on because you'll forget them anyway by the time you get to your drum kit. But I hope you'll remember this. Spend more time tuning your snare drum. I bet it'll sound better. All right, thanks for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow with more Drummer Daily. Thanks for joining me. Bye.